What if the smallest act of kindness could change everything? One rainy morning, a struggling single father pulls over to rescue a soaked, shivering dog on the side of a country road. He thinks he's saving a lost animal, but he has no idea that this dog belongs to a billionaire heiress, or that this single spontaneous act of compassion is about to open the door to healing, hope, and a love he never thought he'd find again. This is not just a story about a man and a dog. It's about second chances, unlikely connections, and the quiet miracles that show up when we least expect them. If you love heartwarming stories that make you laugh, cry, and believe in the goodness of people again, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss a single chapter of this unforgettable journey. Now let's begin. A struggling single dad helped rescue a lost dog, unaware its owner was a secret billionaire CEO. The rain came down in thin, cold sheets, the kind that seeped into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. Matt Coleman hunched deeper into his worn denim jacket, his breath curling in front of him like smoke as he tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The windshield wipers groaned in protest as they swept across the fogged-up glass. Another Tuesday, another busted pipe, another unpaid bill waiting in the mailbox. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Ben, 7 years old and sound asleep, slumped to one side in his booster seat, clutching the frayed edge of his Spider-Man backpack. His mouth hung open slightly, a thin trail of drool glistening on his cheek. Matt smiled, just a little. The kid could sleep through a thunderstorm. They were running late, again. He'd picked up extra work across town to cover rent this month, which meant waking Ben before dawn and dragging him along. Not that the boy complained. Ben rarely did. He'd grown quieter since Emily died. They both had. Matt turned the truck onto the old county road, potholes jostling them as he drove through the early morning mist. That's when he saw it, a flash of gold on the shoulder. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. Maybe a discarded tarp or a pile of wet leaves. But as he slowed, the shape lifted its head. A dog, a golden retriever, soaked to the skin, crouched low to the ground like it was trying to make itself invisible. Its eyes, dark and glistening, met his through the rain. Matt's first instinct was to keep driving. He wasn't in the business of rescuing strays. Life was complicated enough without adding a half-frozen animal to the mix. But something about the way the dog didn't flinch, didn't run, just looked at him, made him ease off the gas. Ben stirred behind him. "Dad?" Matt sighed and pulled over, hazards blinking. "Stay in the truck," he said as he climbed out. The rain hit him like needles. He jogged toward the dog, who didn't move. Its fur clung to its body in clumps, matted with mud. A tattered red collar hung loosely around its neck. "Hey there," Matt said softly, crouching down. "You lost, buddy?" The dog's ears perked slightly at the word buddy. Matt reached out slowly. The dog didn't growl, didn't back away. Instead, it inched forward and placed its cold, wet nose against his palm. "Well, damn," Matt muttered, blinking raindrops from his eyelashes. "You're not just a stray, are you?" He glanced back at the truck. Ben was watching, wide-eyed, his breath fogging the window. Matt made his decision. The dog, who Ben immediately and insistently named Buddy, sat on a towel in the corner of the small living room, tail thumping gently on the floor. Matt's modest. Rental smelled like damp fur and cinnamon oatmeal, a strange but not entirely unpleasant combination. Ben was crouched next to Buddy, whispering secrets and giggling when the dog licked his hand. Matt stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them both. He hadn't seen Ben smile like that in months. "You think he has a home?" Ben asked, not looking up. "I don't know, Bud," Matt replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "He's got a collar but no tags. Could have run off, or maybe someone dumped him." Ben's face fell. "We'll check around," Matt added quickly. "Put up some flyers, maybe ask the shelter if anyone's called about a lost dog. But can he stay for now?" Ben's voice was small, hopeful. "Just for a little while?" Matt hesitated. They didn't have the space, or the money, or the time. But he looked at Buddy, who had curled up next to Ben like he'd belonged there all along, and something in his chest shifted. "Yeah," he said, "just for a little while." Later that night, after Ben had fallen asleep with Buddy snuggled beside him like a furry guardian angel, Matt sat alone at the kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm coffee. The rain had stopped, but the world outside was still grey and heavy with silence. He opened his laptop and clicked through a few lost pet forums, typing in details about a golden retriever found on County Road 6. No matching posts, no messages. He uploaded a photo of Buddy curled up on their ratty couch, then shut the laptop with a sigh. A stray dog, a random soaked, half-starved mutt on a rainy morning, and yet something about it felt different, fated even. Matt didn't believe in signs or miracles. Life hadn't been kind enough to make him that kind of man. But as he walked down the hallway and peeked into Ben's room, saw the boy curled against the sleeping dog, his small hand resting on Buddy's golden fur, he wondered, just for a moment, if maybe the universe hadn't given up on them after all. By the following morning, the house felt warmer somehow. It wasn't the thermostat. Matt kept that at a frugal 68, but something else had shifted. A presence, a lightness. Maybe it was the quiet thump of a tail against the floor, or the way Ben hummed again while brushing his teeth. Buddy had spent the night curled up next to Ben like he'd been guarding the boy his whole life. Matt had peeked in twice during the night, more out of disbelief than concern. Each time, he found them asleep, one small hand buried in golden fur, one big tail twitching in doggy dreams. Now, as Matt flipped pancakes in their tiny kitchen, he heard the sound of scampering paws behind him. "Breakfast for you too, huh?" he said, glancing over his shoulder. Buddy sat politely in the doorway, ears perked, tongue lolling in a wide doggy grin. Matt couldn't help but chuckle. "You're awfully well-behaved for a stray." Ben bounded in, still in his dinosaur pajamas. "Can he have a pancake too, Dad? Please." Matt arched an eyebrow. "No syrup." "Deal." He cut a plain flapjack into quarters and placed it on a plate. Buddy waited until Ben gave the signal, then wolfed it down with pure joy. Watching the boy and dog laugh and play, Matt felt something stir, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months. Hope. They made flyers later that day. Matt printed them at the public library. 6 sheets with a slightly blurry photo of Buddy on the couch, tail wagging, eyes bright. Found dog, golden retriever. Found near County Road 6. No tags. Friendly. Please call Matt. Ben helped him tape them to telephone poles and bulletin boards. He took it seriously, walking with his chest puffed out like a little deputy on duty. Matt watched him from a distance. The boy seemed lighter on his feet, the usual slouch gone from his small shoulders. Grief had aged him too quickly after Emily died. But now there was color in his cheeks again. "Dad," Ben said as they finished posting the last flyer outside the gas station, "what if nobody calls?" Matt paused. "Then we keep trying. Someone out there's missing him." Ben kicked at a pebble. "Or maybe he was meant to find us." Matt didn't answer right away. He looked down at Buddy, who sat obediently at Ben's side, watching the world with calm, thoughtful eyes. "Maybe," Matt said softly. "Maybe he was." That evening, Matt tried calling the local shelter. "Golden retriever, no tags, red." "Caller," the receptionist said. "You're the 4th person this week to call with a similar story." "Really?" Matt sat up. "That common?" "Well, yes and no. Could be a purebred that got loose. But if he's well-groomed and trained, someone's probably missing him. No one's called in yet? Not for one fitting that exact description, but we'll keep your info on file." Matt hung up, thoughtful. He leaned back and looked at Buddy, who had just figured out how to open the pantry door with his paw. The dog was trying to fish out a bag of peanut butter dog biscuits Ben had insisted on buying that afternoon. "You're smart," Matt muttered. "Too smart to be out there on your own." Buddy turned his head, as if he'd heard, tail thumping once, before going back to work on the door handle. Matt smiled in spite of himself. That night, after Ben was asleep, Matt found himself sitting at the kitchen table with his old leather-bound notebook. He hadn't written anything since Emily's funeral. The pages had once held doodles, sketches, dreams they had for the house they never got to finish. Recipes, jokes, little notes Ben used to scribble and hand him while he worked. Now, he flipped to a fresh page and began, Day 1 with Buddy. Ben smiled today. Not just a little. He laughed. Out loud, the dog's a mess, muddy paws, snores like a freight train, but somehow it's like having another heartbeat in the house. It's strange how you can miss something you didn't know you needed. He stared at the words for a long moment, then closed the notebook. From the living room came the sound of a gentle bark, followed by the low creak of Ben's bed frame. Matt stood quietly and tiptoed down the hall. Ben was half awake, reaching in the dark. Buddy? Matt stepped in. He's here, Bud, he's right here. Buddy hopped up beside the boy, nuzzling under his chin. Ben wrapped his arms around him with a sigh, then drifted off again. Matt leaned against the doorframe and exhaled. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The bills weren't going away. The loneliness still sat like a stone in his chest. Some nights. But tonight, in this quiet little house, something fragile and good had found its way in, and for the first time in a long while, Matt didn't feel quite so alone. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime on the top floor of Langford Tower, revealing a quiet, modern office lined with glass walls and soft lighting, the kind of place where the air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and wealth. At the far end, behind a minimalist desk made of reclaimed wood, sat a woman in a slate-grey cashmere sweater, staring at her phone as if it had betrayed her. Vanessa Langford hadn't slept in 2 days. She'd combed every inch of the wooded estate outside the mountain retreat. Her security team had spent hours scouring the private hiking trails, drone footage, even the side roads, but there had been no sign. No scratches on the gate, no paw prints in the mud, just absence. Buddy was gone. She unlocked her phone again and scrolled through the photos. There he was, in better times, chasing snowflakes perched in the backseat of her Porsche, sleeping in ridiculous positions on her Italian linen sheets. The last picture was from that morning on the trail. His tongue hung out crookedly, his eyes bright, his fur gleaming in the sunlight. And now nothing. Ms. Langford. Vanessa looked up, startled. Her assistant, Corey, lingered at the doorway, tablet in hand. I've called all the shelters. Within a 50-mile radius. No one's reported him in. I also checked social media. There are a few posts about lost dogs, but none match Buddy's description exactly. Vanessa rubbed her temples. Keep looking. Of course, Corey said, hesitating. Do you want to postpone the investor lunch today? No, I'll handle it. He gave her a hesitant nod before disappearing down the hallway. Vanessa stood slowly, walking to the wall of windows that overlooked the city. Everything was neat, predictable, controlled. Her whole life had been engineered for precision. Langford Innovations wasn't just a name. It was an empire. Built from her father's legacy, expanded by her drive, sustained by her willingness to outwork, outlast, and outperform anyone in her way. But this was chaos. A missing dog, her dog, the last real connection she had to a man who taught her everything she knew about loyalty and grace. When her father passed away the year before, Buddy had become more than a pet. He had been there through the endless corporate meetings, the funerals, the lonely nights in cavernous penthouses. He knew when she was pretending. He knew when the silence got too heavy, and now he was just gone. Back in her private suite upstairs, Vanessa sat on the floor beside Buddy's empty bed, running her fingers along the edges of his favorite chew toy. a ridiculous plush raccoon named Mr. Squeaks. She hadn't cried yet. She wasn't sure if she knew how anymore. Her phone buzzed, a message from Corey. Someone posted this on a local forum outside Maple Ridge. Attachment: found dog, golden retriever, male, red collar, sweet temperament, contact Matt, number. Photo: a slightly blurred image of Buddy on a worn-out couch curled up in sleep. Vanessa stared at the screen. It was him. Her heart caught in her throat. The photo wasn't glamorous. Buddy looked comfortable, safe. His fur was brushed, his eyes calm. Whoever had him wasn't just harboring a stray, they were caring for him. She tapped the number, then paused. Her finger hovered over the green call button. What would she say? "Hi, that's my designer-bred golden retriever, and I'd like him back now." "Thanks for keeping him warm." It sounded transactional, cold. She didn't want Buddy returned like a lost wallet. Vanessa lowered the phone and took a breath. No, this needed to be different. The drive to Maple Ridge took less than 2 hours. It was a modest town, the kind with gas stations that still had window squeegees and main streets where every shop had been there since the 70s. Her sleek black SUV felt out of place among the aging trucks and sun-faded sedans. She followed the GPS to a small rental house with peeling paint and a crooked porch. There were 2 bikes leaned against the side of the house, a wind chime made from silverware clinking softly near the door. Vanessa hesitated, heart pounding in a way it hadn't during board meetings or press interviews. Then she saw him. Buddy was in the yard, chasing a tennis ball with a boy who couldn't have been more than 7. The child giggled as Buddy leapt into the air and returned triumphantly, tail wagging like mad. A man stood nearby, watching with a tired kind of contentment, a slight smile on his unshaven face. Vanessa didn't move. She took it all in. Buddy's happiness, the boy's laughter, the way the man crouched down to pet the dog's head with gentle familiarity. It wasn't just care, it was connection, it was family, and something inside her cracked open. She didn't knock. Not yet. Instead, she stood there quietly, just out of sight, her eyes burning. She had come to claim what was hers. But in that moment, she realized maybe Buddy had already found where he belonged. The sound of laughter came first, high and sweet, bubbling through the walls like sunlight through curtains. Matt paused in the hallway, a socket wrench in hand, and listened. Ben's voice rang out in the living room, giggling uncontrollably, followed by the sharp yip of a delighted dog. Then came the unmistakable crash of something falling. "Uh-oh!" Ben called out. "Dad, it was the lamp again!" Matt sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. That old brass floor lamp had survived 3 moves, a toddler phase, and 1 epic Nerf gun battle. He wasn't sure it would survive Buddy. He walked into the living room to find the lamp sideways on the carpet, shade-dented, Buddy looking vaguely apologetic, and Ben holding up both hands like a criminal caught in the act. "I told him to sit," Ben said, eyes wide. But he got excited. Buddy wagged his tail furiously, clearly unbothered by the destruction. Matt shook his head, but couldn't stop the smile tugging at his mouth. "Let me guess. You were doing laps again." "It's training," Ben insisted. "He's learning. Agility. He's a natural," Buddy barked as if in agreement, then launched himself into Ben's arms, knocking the boy backward onto the couch in a fit of giggles. Matt's heart gave a strange little twist. It wasn't just the sound of laughter, it was Ben's laughter. Pure, unfiltered joy. Something that had been missing for so long, Matt had nearly forgotten what it sounded like. Ever since Emily passed, the house had been too quiet. Not just silent, but still, like a photograph. Grief had settled into every corner. It made everything feel suspended, incomplete. But now the air was moving again. That afternoon, while Ben did his homework at the kitchen table, his tongue poking out in concentration as he added fractions, Matt stepped outside to patch a loose shutter on the porch. Buddy trailed after him, curious and ever-present, sitting dutifully by the toolbox as Matt worked. "You've got good timing, I'll give you that," Matt muttered, tightening a hinge. "We needed a distraction around here, a good one." Buddy tilted his head as if listening. "Ben needed you most of all." Matt glanced through the window, watching his son frown at his math sheet, pencil tapping thoughtfully. The boy had been slipping away slowly, not in any dramatic way, just fading. No more morning jokes, no more questions about the stars. Just quiet obedience and far-off stares, until Buddy showed up. Now there were messes again, noise and light. Matt swallowed, returning to the shutter. He didn't believe in fate, but sometimes, when the world gave you exactly what you needed without asking for it, you had to wonder. Later that evening, Ben and Buddy fell asleep on the living room floor while watching an old animated movie. Buddy's head rested on Ben's belly, rising and falling with each slow breath. Matt watched them for a while before pulling out his notebook. Day 3 with Buddy. Ben laughed so hard today, he snorted apple juice through his nose. I forgot what that sounded like. Laughter in this house. Life. I keep thinking someone will call about him, but a selfish part of me hopes they don't. He paused, then underlined the last sentence. Matt wasn't naive. He knew someone out there probably missed this dog. Buddy was too well-trained, too in tune with people, to have been astray for long. And when that call came, because it would, he'd do the right thing. But in the meantime, he'd savor this. The sound of his son laughing again. The feeling of something alive filling the cracks in their home. A small, golden reminder that not everything had to stay broken. The next morning, a knock came at the door. Matt, still in a faded t-shirt and jeans smudged with grease, opened it to find a woman standing on his porch. She was striking, not in a flashy way but quietly composed, with chestnut hair pulled into a low ponytail and dark eyes that missed nothing. She wore a forest green coat, elegant but functional, and held her hands clasped in front of her. "Hi," she said. "I saw the flyer about the dog." Matt stiffened. His heart dropped, but he kept his expression even. "Come in," he said. Buddy was the first to recognize her. He bounded into the room, tail wagging furiously, and skidded to a halt in front of the woman. She knelt instantly, hands buried in his fur, as if she needed to touch him just to believe he was real. "Hey, you," she whispered, voice cracking. Ben appeared in the doorway, hair tousled. "Is she Buddy's mom?" Matt chuckled softly. "Looks like it." The woman looked up and for a moment, just a moment, her polished veneer slipped. There was something raw in her expression, a tremble. Then she gathered herself and stood. "I'm Vanessa," she said. "Thank you for taking care of him." "No problem," Matt said, watching her carefully. "He's been a good addition." She smiled faintly, then looked at Buddy, who had settled next to Ben with his head on the boy's foot. He didn't seem torn, just comfortable, at home. I didn't expect him to bond with anyone else so quickly," she admitted. "Dogs know where they're needed," Matt said simply. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, more contemplative. Finally, Vanessa cleared her throat. "Would it be all right if I came by again, just to see him? I won't disrupt anything. I'd like to be around him." Matt looked at Ben, who was scratching Buddy's ears. He nodded. "Yeah, I think that'd be okay." Vanessa wasn't used to knocking on doors. In her world, doors opened before she reached them. Assistants managed her calendar, drivers waited curbside with umbrellas, and baristas knew her coffee order before she said a word. But now, standing in front of a weathered wooden door with a small ceramic welcome sign hanging crookedly on a nail, she hesitated. In her arms was a canvas tote bag, neatly packed with a few new dog toys, a bag of organic treats, and a small, slightly awkward peace offering, a homemade apple pie. She had baked it herself, burned the first one, cursed through the second, and finally produced something edible on the third try. There was something grounding about measuring flour and peeling apples, something human. She took a breath and knocked. The door opened a few seconds later. Matt stood there wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked the same as the day she met him, rumpled, solid, a quiet steadiness in his eyes. He glanced at the bag. "You come bearing gifts?" Vanessa held up the pie, sheepish. "I thought Buddy might forgive me faster if I bribed him." Matt cracked a smile. "Smart. Come in." Inside, the house smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Buddy was stretched across the living room floor, snoring softly, while Ben sat nearby, coloring a picture of a rocket ship with far too many wings. Ben looked up and beamed. "It's the lady with the kind eyes." Vanessa blinked, caught off. "A guard by the nickname." "Well, that's very kind of you." Matt took the pie and set it on the kitchen counter. "He's been asking when you'd come back." "So has Buddy," Ben added. "He stares at the door like he's waiting." Vanessa crouched beside Buddy and scratched behind his ears. The dog opened one eye, gave a lazy thump of his tail, then rolled over for a belly rub. "He's not mad at me then," she murmured. "Seems like you passed," Matt said from behind her. They ended up sitting outside on the porch, mugs of coffee in hand, while Ben played in the yard with Buddy, who now wore a red bandana Vanessa had brought. It looked ridiculous, but the boy had insisted, and Buddy had accepted it with his usual patience. Vanessa sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the simplicity of it all. No boardrooms, no press, no curated conversations, just sunlight, birdsong, and the occasional burst of laughter from the yard. "You don't live around here," Matt said, more statement than question. Vanessa glanced sideways. "No, I was at a mountain retreat a couple towns over. Buddy slipped out of the gate when one of the staff forgot to lock it." "You didn't say you were staying at Langford Pines." He said it casually, but she heard the subtle weight beneath the words. She hesitated. "You looked it up." "I looked you up," Matt admitted. "Your name was on the adoption registry at the vet when I had Buddy scanned. I didn't push, just got curious." Vanessa set her mug down. "And now," he shrugged, "now you're someone who came back for her dog and brought pie." She smiled, grateful. Most people changed when they realized who she was. Matt hadn't. If anything, he seemed more grounded by the knowledge. "What's it like?" he asked. "Running a company that big?" Vanessa considered the question. "Lonely," she said finally. "Rewarding, yes, but exhausting. My father built it from nothing, and I've spent the last 10 years trying not to ruin it." Matt nodded. "I know something about trying not to ruin things." She looked at him. He took a long sip of coffee. "I fix things for a living, pipes, wiring, HVACs. But I couldn't fix my wife's cancer, couldn't fix my son's sadness after she died, couldn't fix the silence in this house, until your dog wandered in." The admission was quiet, vulnerable. Vanessa didn't speak. She didn't try to fill the silence or offer empty comfort. She just sat with it, let it settle between them like shared breath. Then she said, "Maybe Buddy knew." "Knew what?" "That this was the place he needed to be." Matt looked out at Ben, who was now trying to teach Buddy how to fetch a frisbee with only moderate success. The boy's laughter rang through the air again, light and alive. "Maybe," Matt said softly. "Maybe we needed him more than you did." As the sun began to dip behind the trees, Vanessa stood to leave. Ben ran up with a hand-drawn card, crayon scribbles that looked vaguely like a woman, a dog, and a giant heart. "It's us," he said proudly. "Me, you, and Buddy." Vanessa crouched to accept it. "Thank you, Ben, I love it. Will you come back tomorrow?" Matt raised an eyebrow. Vanessa smiled. "If that's all right." Matt didn't hesitate this time. "Yeah," he said, "that'd be all right." It started with a sandwich. Vanessa showed up on a Sunday afternoon, carrying a basket that would have looked pretentious in any other context. But here, on the porch of Matt's weathered house, it felt almost sweet. Inside, were homemade turkey. Sandwiches, apple slices in little baggies, 2 cans of root beer, and a separate container of treats labeled "For Buddy Only." Udn in Ben's handwriting. "Ben insisted," she said, handing over the treats. Matt peeked into the basket. He may have a future in food marketing. Ben, grinning from ear to ear, was already dragging out a blanket to lay across the patchy grass in their backyard. Buddy ran loops around him, stopping occasionally to nose the basket like a furry food critic. Vanessa glanced around the yard. "Do you mind eating out here?" "Honestly," Matt said, adjusting the brim of his baseball cap, "I think this place has been waiting for a picnic for years." So they sat on a mismatched blanket, eating too many sandwiches, laughing at Buddy's relentless pursuit of an apple slice he couldn't quite grip. It was simple, unscripted, and something Matt hadn't realized he missed until that very moment: company that didn't feel like work. Ben dozed off in the sun not long after, his head resting on Buddy's side, a half-eaten sandwich still in his hand. Matt and Vanessa moved back to the porch, their voices lower, more intimate now, softened by the hush of a spring breeze. "You're different out here," Matt said, watching her over the rim of his glass. Vanessa tilted her head. "Different how?" "Calmer, less armored." She chuckled, setting her drink down. "That's one word for it. My assistant would say off-brand." "You have a brand?" Vanessa gave him a look. "I'm a woman CEO in a male-dominated field. Of course I have a brand. Efficient, strategic, unflappable, suit always pressed, smile always measured. No room for error," Matt nodded slowly. "And here," she shrugged, then looked toward Ben and Buddy, both asleep now. "Here I'm a little more human." There was a pause. "You cook?" he asked. She raised a brow. "That's your transition?" He smirked. "Just trying to figure out if those sandwiches were really made by you or some elite catering firm." Vanessa laughed, really laughed, and Matt caught it in his chest like a breath he didn't want to exhale. "I made them, burned the first batch, Googled how to slice an apple like a mom. I even used cookie cutters on the crusts." Matt smiled, his eyes soft. "You didn't have to do any of that." "I know," she said quietly, "but I wanted to." Later, while Ben still slept and Buddy snored in the shade, Vanessa wandered into the kitchen, curious about the framed photos on the walls. There weren't many, just a handful of candid moments. Ben in a Halloween costume, Emily and Matt and their wedding day. A photo of baby Ben asleep on Matt's chest, both of them covered in flour. She paused in front of that one. "He was 6 months old," Matt said behind her. "I was trying to bake a birthday cake for Emily. He got into the flour bin." Vanessa turned. "You look so young." "Yeah," he said with a distant smile. "We were. We had no clue what we were doing, but we laughed a lot." She had this way of making the worst days feel survivable. Vanessa studied his face. He wasn't drowning in the memory, but it still weighed on him. Grief had become part of his posture, something he carried like an old injury. "Ben told me about her," she said gently. "He said she used to sing in the mornings." Matt looked away. "Yeah, Here Comes the Sun, every day, even when it was raining." There was a moment of quiet between them, not awkward, but reverent, as if speaking her name summoned her, presence soft and lingering in the corners of the house. "I didn't mean to intrude," Vanessa said. "You're not," Matt replied. "Honestly, it's nice, talking about her." He gestured toward the kitchen table. "Want some coffee? It's not fancy. No oat milk or cinnamon foam," she smiled, "as long as it's hot." They sat for an hour, sipping coffee from mismatched mugs. Vanessa spoke about her father, how he'd built the company from a single software patent and raised her in a world of data and deadlines, but somehow always made time for dinner. She told Matt how Buddy had been her father's dog first, a gift from a friend when he was going through chemo. He used to say Buddy had better bedside manner than most doctors. she said with a wistful smile. And after he passed, he stayed with me through the funeral, the silence after, the days I didn't want to get out of bed. She paused. He was the only thing in my life that didn't want something from me. Matt watched her carefully. You still think you want him back? Vanessa looked down at her hands. I don't know. I thought I did. But then I saw him with Ben. And with you. She exhaled. Sometimes I think Buddy was trying to find his way back to something real. Matt nodded slowly. Yeah, me too. That evening as Vanessa stood by her car, Ben ran up and hugged her waist. Buddy barked goodbye, tail wagging like a metronome of joy. You coming back next Sunday? Ben asked. Vanessa looked at Matt. That's all right, she said. Matt nodded once, steady and sure. Yeah, he said, it is. The storm rolled in suddenly, unexpected for spring, but fierce enough to rattle the old windows and flicker the lights. Matt stood at the living room window, arms crossed, watching grey clouds churn over Maple Ridge like a slow-moving beast. The wind carried that earthy smell of wet soil and electricity, the kind that made you brace for something to break. Buddy paced restlessly. Ben sat cross-legged on the floor with his favorite book, though his eyes kept darting to the windows. Is it gonna thunder? He asked. Probably, Matt said, but we're safe inside. Storms pass. Ben didn't answer right away. He reached for Buddy, who leaned into him as if offering silent reassurance. Do you think Vanessa's okay? Matt's chest tightened. Ben had taken to mentioning her more often, casually, like she was part of their routine. She came by every Sunday now, sometimes midweek too, brought baked goods and lopsided drawings Buddy had made with his paw pressed, in paint. But more than that, she brought warmth, real warmth, not performative kindness, but something sincere, steady, and increasingly difficult to ignore. She's probably curled up in a fancy chair with hot chocolate, Matt replied with a smile. That house of hers can probably fly through a tornado. Ben giggled, the tension easing, but Matt's own chest remained tight, not from the storm outside, but the one building inside him. He hadn't planned to turn on the TV. But once Ben was asleep and Buddy had settled like a sandbag next to the boy's bed, Matt wandered into the kitchen, poured a modest glass of scotch, and flipped through channels, something to fill the silence. Then he saw her, Vanessa, not in jeans and boots, not with flour on her cheek or laughter in her voice. This was the Vanessa Langford that the world knew. On the news, standing behind a podium at a sleek investor summit in San Francisco. Her hair was pulled back in a tight twist, her suit charcoal grey and crisp, her expression unreadable. The chyron beneath her read, Langford Innovations launches global initiative for AI, ethics and security. She spoke with confidence and clarity, fielding questions with poise. She referenced projections, technology milestones, global partnerships. It was dazzling, impressive, and utterly foreign. Matt sat down slowly, the glass forgotten in his hand. This wasn't the woman who spilled coffee in his kitchen, who crouched beside his son to tie Buddy's new scarf, who shared stories about her father with her voice just slightly breaking. He watched her finish her speech, then smiled for the cameras, that tight, polite expression she never wore around them. And something in him recoiled. How long had she planned to keep this from him, and why did it feel like betrayal? The next day, Vanessa stopped by in her usual casual clothes, dark jeans, a soft green sweater. She knocked, as always, Buddy already. Scratching at the door with joy, Matt answered, jaw tense. Hey! She said brightly, holding a bag of cinnamon rolls. I saw you, he said without warmth. She blinked. Excuse me? On TV, last night, big summit, big stage. The smile dropped from her face. Matt, you've been coming here for weeks, talking about homemade sandwiches and bedtime songs and grief and healing, and all the while you're, what, running the world on your lunch breaks? She set the bag down carefully on the porch railing. I didn't lie to you. No, you just omitted the part where you're a billionaire CEO. That's not a small detail, Vanessa. She took a breath. I wasn't hiding. I just wanted to be seen as a person, not a headline. For once. Matt's voice was low. You think I would have treated you differently? Everyone does. Well, congratulations, he snapped. Now I know. Vanessa's shoulders tensed. I never used this place for anything. I came because I wanted to, because it was real. Was it? Silence stretched between them. Buddy sat at Vanessa's feet, sensing the shift. She looked up at him then, eyes steady but sad. You think I'm playing some kind of game, that I showed up here to, get good PR? Matt didn't respond. I came here because your son reminded me what joy feels like, because your home reminded me what peace sounds like, and because you, her voice caught for just a second, you reminded me that I still have a heart. Then, quieter, I never meant to hurt you. Matt swallowed hard, jaw flexing. Well, you did. She nodded. I understand. Then she turned and walked away. That night the house was too quiet. Ben sensed it too. He asked where Vanessa was, and Matt said simply, she's busy. The boy didn't question it, but he watched his father for a long time, as if trying to read the spaces between the words. Buddy didn't sleep in his usual spot. He stayed near the front door, occasionally letting out a soft whine, as if waiting for the sound of a car pulling up or a familiar footstep, but no one came, and though the storm had passed, the silence it left behind was somehow louder than the thunder. Vanessa didn't return the next day, or the day after that. Matt kept telling himself it was for the best. Clean breaks were better, no messy explanations, no false hope. She had her world, and he had his. It wasn't anger that lingered, not exactly. It was something closer to disappointment, mixed with a hollow sort of ache he couldn't shake. He went through the motions, work, dinner, dishes, bedtime stories for Ben that felt thinner than usual, like the joy had been wrung out and replaced with obligation. Even Buddy seemed to know something had shifted. He lay by the door most evenings, ears perked at any passing car, tail thumping and then stilling again when nothing happened. Matt hated how quickly they'd all gotten used to her, hated that her absence felt like a missing chair at the dinner table, hated most of all that she'd somehow slipped under his skin, even when he'd sworn his heart was done with that kind of risk. Ben didn't ask for her again. He just got quiet. One evening, 4 days after the argument, Matt found Ben sitting cross-legged on the floor of his room, with construction paper spread out around him. "What you working on?" he asked gently, crouching beside him. Ben didn't look up. "Just making something." Matt sat down and waited. Sometimes silence was the best invitation. Finally, Ben handed him a folded card. The front was a crayon drawing, Vanessa, Buddy, and Ben standing beneath a giant sun with wavy yellow rays. The inside read, in big, slightly wobbly letters, "Dear Vanessa, Buddy misses you. I think Dad does too. I know you're really busy and maybe you're sad like him sometimes, but we like when you're here. Please come back if you want. Love, Ben." Matt's throat closed. "She didn't lie, Dad," Ben said quietly. "She just didn't want to be treated different." Matt didn't answer. Ben looked at him then, not with accusation, but with the steady gaze only kids seem capable of, the kind that saw through layers adults tried to hide behind. "Sometimes I want to be just a normal kid, not the one whose mom died," Ben said softly. Maybe she felt the same. It wasn't the words. It was the truth in them, undeniable, simple, pure. Matt wrapped an arm around his son and pulled him close. "Can we send it?" Ben asked after a moment. "The letter?" Matt nodded. "Yeah, Bud, we can." It took a day to find the address. Vanessa had always avoided saying exactly where she lived, but Matt remembered a passing comment about a lakeside neighborhood and pieced it together from there. The envelope was plain, no return address, no expectations, just honesty. Ben dropped it in the mailbox himself, standing on tiptoe to do it. Then they waited. Vanessa was seated on the floor of her sunlit living room when the letter arrived. She'd been there for hours, barefoot, cross-legged on the cream-colored rug that once cost more than her first car. A mug of tea sat cold beside her. Buddy's toys were still in the corner where she used to toss them from the couch, though now the space felt oddly sterile, like a stage set that had forgotten its script. Her assistant had tried to pull her back into meetings, campaigns, board presentations. She had cancelled all of it. There was a kind of numbness to losing something that had never really been yours. Matt had every right to be angry. She had withheld the truth, not to manipulate him, but to protect herself from being reduced to what she was in the headlines, an icon, a machine, a brand. She missed the way Ben called her Miss Vanessa, with that hopeful lilt, like maybe she'd stay forever. She missed the quiet, cluttered kitchen with the chipped mugs and squeaky chairs. She missed the letter. It was tucked between bills and business offers, no return address. The handwriting was unmistakable. She opened it slowly, hands trembling. By the time she finished reading, her vision blurred with tears. No one had written her a letter in years. Not like that. Not with love and no expectations. Not with the kind of acceptance that wrapped around her like a second skin. Just come back if you want. She read it again, then again, and something inside her, something brittle and guarded, began to soften. The next Sunday, the sun rose warm over Maple Ridge. Trees danced lightly in the breeze, and the scent of blooming lilacs drifted through open windows. Matty stood in the kitchen, pouring batter onto a hot skillet, trying not to think too much. Buddy sat near the door, ears twitching. Ben colored in a corner, humming a tune under his breath, "Here Comes the Sun," out of key but heartfelt. Then came the knock, soft, hesitant. Matt froze. Buddy barked once, sharp, excited. Ben dropped his crayons. Matt opened the door. There she stood. Vanessa looked nothing like the version on the news. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her cardigan soft and worn, her eyes uncertain but clear. She held a pie in her hands. "I used a different crust recipe this time," she said. "It's not perfect, but I wanted to try again." Matt stared at her, then he stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said. Vanessa let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Buddy launched himself into her side. With a happy yelp, Ben ran up and hugged her waist. "I knew you'd come back." Vanessa crouched and held him close. "So did I," she whispered. The following days passed like early spring sunlight, slow, golden and gentle. Vanessa didn't try to reclaim her old routines. She didn't rush to explain herself or fill the silences with apologies. Instead, she simply showed up, quietly, consistently. On Tuesday, she brought a pot of beef stew and stayed to help with Ben's homework. On Friday, she showed up with art supplies and sat cross-legged on the porch with him for nearly an hour, painting lopsided trees and clouds that looked like flying turtles. Matt watched it all unfold like someone standing in the middle of a dream. He didn't realize he wanted. The woman who had once stood on a global stage now stood at his kitchen sink, rinsing dishes with her sleeves rolled up, her hair in a messy knot, laughing at Ben's knock-knock jokes like they were the funniest things in the world, and strangely they were. He still hadn't said much about what had passed between them. Neither had she. But there was a quiet understanding growing in the space between them, like a seed that had found good soil. On the morning of Ben's 8th birthday, the house buzzed with unusual energy. Streamers hung across the living room, slightly crooked, courtesy of Matt's half-hearted attempt at party decorating. A pile of wrapped gifts sat on the kitchen table, and on the front lawn stood the pièce de résistance, a handmade wooden fort painted bright blue with a small sign that read, "Captain Ben's Command Center." Vanessa had commissioned it from a local carpenter Matt knew, paying extra to Have it built overnight while Ben slept. When Ben saw it, he screamed in delight. "You're the best non-mom but still awesome lady ever," he shouted, throwing his arms around Vanessa's waist. Matt grinned. "High praise, trust me." They celebrated simply, just the three of them and Buddy, who wore a birthday hat that he continually tried to remove. There was chocolate cake and homemade lemonade, followed by a scavenger hunt through the yard. It wasn't extravagant. It was perfect. That evening, after Ben fell asleep exhausted and sugar-drunk, Vanessa sat with Matt on the back porch. The sky was streaked with lavender and pale orange, and the hum of cicadas had just begun. They hadn't spoken much since the birthday candles were blown out. Now, in the hush of twilight, Matt finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking," he said, "about that day when I saw you on TV." Vanessa didn't look at him, just sipped her tea and waited. "I was mad," he said. "But more than that, I felt small, like I'd let someone into my life without knowing who they really were. And maybe I wasn't enough." Vanessa turned to him, brows furrowing. "Matt, I know," he interrupted gently. "That's not on you, that's me. My past, losing Emily. It made me cautious, careful. But then you walked in with pie and a dog who doesn't listen to anyone, and I forgot how to be guarded." He glanced down at his hands. "You scared me," he admitted, "because I wanted you to stay. And wanting something again, it's harder than I remembered." Vanessa reached over and placed her hand over his. "I was scared too," she said, "of being seen for more than the title, of being wanted for something other than what I could offer." They sat in silence, fingers lightly intertwined. Then, she said almost shyly, "I stepped down." Matt blinked. "What?" "From Langford Innovations. I made it official yesterday." He stared at her, stunned. "You left your own company." "I didn't leave," she corrected. "I passed the torch. I'll still advise, still support the board, but it's time for something different." Matt couldn't find the words. "I've been building things my whole life," Vanessa continued. "Empires, products, profits, but I never built peace. And I want that now, not someday, now." Matt looked at her, really looked, and saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't lost, she wasn't running, she was arriving. He reached for her hand again. "You're always welcome here," he said quietly. The next morning Matt woke early too. The smell of coffee and the sound of someone humming. It wasn't Ben. He walked into the kitchen to find Vanessa barefoot, hair damp from a shower, wearing one of his flannel shirts and moving about the kitchen like she'd been doing it for years. She looked up and smiled softly. "I hope you don't mind. I figured I owed you a real breakfast." Matt leaned against the doorway, heart full. "You make a habit of stealing my shirts?" he teased. She shrugged. "Only the good ones." From the living room, Buddy barked. As Ben chased him in circles, laughter echoing through the house. It was chaos. It was joy. It was home. The table had never really been full. Even before Emily passed, the dining table, handmade by Matt's father, had always seated just three. One chair for him, one for her, and a booster for Ben. It wasn't a grand piece, a little wobbly in one leg, the finish scratched from years of cereal spills and Lego battles. But it held their memories in its grain, quiet and constant. Now, for the first time in a long while, there was a fourth chair. Matt had pulled it from the corner, dusted it off, and tucked it in beside Ben's. No announcement, no explanation, just a silent invitation. Vanessa noticed it the moment she walked in. She paused in the doorway, balancing a casserole dish and a bottle of wine. "One more chair?" Matt gave her a half-smile. "Seemed overdue." Her eyes softened. "I hope I'm worthy of it." "You earned it when you baked that lopsided pie," he said, taking the dish from her hands. Ben burst in from the hallway, face flushed from excitement. "Dad made green beans with bacon. It's his fancy recipe." Vanessa grinned. "Then, I'm definitely staying." They sat down to eat, Ben's chair slightly askew, Buddy lying under the table like a sentry. Conversation flowed easily. Matt told stories from his years in plumbing, Ben chimed in with frequent dramatic exaggerations, and Vanessa listened with the kind of attention that made a person feel like they mattered. Halfway through dinner, Ben leaned across the table and placed something in front of Vanessa. A small hand-painted name card, Miss Vanessa, family guest. Vanessa ran her fingers across the uneven letters, eyes stinging. "Did you make this?" Ben nodded proudly. "Because you're here almost every day now, and Dad always says, good guests bring dessert and help with dishes, but you bring everything." Vanessa glanced at Matt. He was looking at her too, the kind of look that said more than words could carry. She folded the card carefully and tucked it into her purse. "Then I guess I'll have to stay for dishes." Later, with Ben tucked into bed, Matt and Vanessa stood side by side in the kitchen, washing and drying. The rhythm was familiar now, like they'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. "So," Matt said, passing her a plate, "you thinking of staying around for more than just dinner?" Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Is that your version of a grand romantic gesture?" "Depends. Is it working?" She set the plate down and turned to him. "I've lived in penthouses and hotel suites, ate dinner alone more nights than I can count, and I've never felt more at home than I do in this kitchen with chipped plates and a slightly crooked faucet." Matt stepped closer. "That faucet has character." "So do you," she whispered. He hesitated. Then, gently, he reached for her. "And I'm not flashy," he said. "I don't own a yacht. I can't quote poetry. I don't have a 5-year plan." "I don't need a 5-year plan," she replied. "I just need someone who shows up." "I can do that," he said. Then, with quiet certainty, he added, "Would you mind waking up here a few more mornings?" She smiled, a smile that started in her eyes and melted across her whole face. "Only if I get the good coffee mug." Matt laughed, leaned in and kissed her. Not a dramatic, sweeping kiss like in the movies. Just a soft, sure one. The kind that said home isn't a place, it's a person. The next morning, the fourth chair was still at the table. Vanessa poured coffee into the mug with the faded "World's Okayest Dad" inscription, grinning as Matt fake scowled at her. Ben held up. "A drawing? Look, it's all of us, me, Dad, Buddy, and you." Vanessa squinted. "Why do I have a cape?" "Because you're a hero," Ben said simply. She blinked fast, then reached across the table to ruffle his hair. "Well, even heroes have to do the dishes." Matt leaned back, sipping his coffee. "You know," he said casually, "the old mechanic's shop downtown is up for sale." Vanessa tilted her head. "Yeah?" "I was thinking," he continued, "maybe it's time I stop working job to job. Open something real, steady, fix things the right way. Teach Ben a little something too." She nodded slowly. "And maybe, next to it, we start a little rescue shelter. For dogs like Buddy, therapy dogs maybe, for families who need a second chance." Matt smiled. "You reading my mind again?" "No," she said, smiling back, "just listening to your heart." As the day began, the three of them, plus one, tail-wagging golden retriever, stepped out into the sunlight. No grand plans, no guarantees, just one more chair at the table, and the courage to fill it. The grand opening was nothing like the ribbon cuttings Vanessa used to attend. There were no press cameras, no catered hors d'oeuvres, no keynote speeches. Just a string of hand-drawn banners fluttering across the storefront, a table of lemonade and homemade cookies, and a mismatched crowd of curious neighbors with smiles on their faces. The sign above the door read, "Second Chances, Auto and Animal Rescue," and underneath, in smaller letters, "Fixing what's broken with care." Matt stood beside Vanessa in front of the shop, his arm brushing hers as they greeted guests and handed out dog biscuits in little paper bags. Ben darted in and out of the crowd, giving Buddy a full tour of the building like the dog was mayor of Maple Ridge. The building had once been a run-down garage with cracked windows and rusting tool benches. Now it gleamed. Half of it had been transformed into a fully functioning auto repair shop, complete with a small waiting area and espresso machine Ben had lobbied for. The other half housed a cozy rescue space, 5 large kennels, a play area, and a bright mural of dogs in capes flying across a blue sky. The whole thing felt improbable, and yet perfectly right. Vanessa turned to Matt as a woman in her 70s walked up with a rescued mutt and tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one wanted him because he's blind. But you saw him." Matt simply smiled. "Everyone deserves to be seen." Vanessa squeezed his hand, heart swelling. They had built this, together, not from ambition or obligation, but from love, the quiet, steady kind that shows up every day and asks, "What do you need? How can I help?" That night, after the last guest left and the shop lights dimmed, they sat on the porch of Matt's house, the same porch where Vanessa had once brought her awkward apology pie. Buddy lay curled at their feet, snoring, and Ben had long since fallen asleep upstairs, one arm thrown across a pile of comic books. Vanessa rested her head on Matt's shoulder. "I was thinking," she murmured. "Maybe we should host adoption, days on Sundays. You know, families looking for someone just like we were." Matt nodded. "And maybe I'll teach Ben how to change a tire without breaking 3 sockets." She smiled. Small miracles. A long silence settled between them, comfortable, warm. Then Matt turned, gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and said, "I used to think life ended the day Emily passed. Like everything good had already happened, and all that was left was just survival." Vanessa looked at him, her hand finding his, "But then a muddy dog showed up," he continued, "and a woman who knew how to burn sandwiches and still somehow made them taste like hope." She laughed softly, blinking back tears. "I didn't know I could fall in love again," he said. "Didn't know I wanted to, but here you are." She leaned in. "Here I am." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple gold band. "I don't have a yacht or a private jet," Matt said, "but I have this table, this porch, this family, and I want you to be part of it, always." Vanessa covered her mouth with one hand, eyes wide. "And wet, yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she kissed him like a promise. Weeks later, Ben stood in front of his class, his voice steady and proud. They were doing a My Family Story presentation, and while the other kids talked about camping trips and great-uncles in the Navy, Ben held up a drawing. "This is Buddy," he said, pointing to the golden blur on the paper. "He used to be a lost dog, but he found us." He smiled, showing 2 missing front teeth. "Then we found Miss Vanessa. She used to be really important in the city, but now she's our Miss Vanessa. She's gonna marry my dad. And we're opening a place that helps dogs and cars, which is cool 'cause I love both." The teacher chuckled. A few parents wiped their eyes. Ben finished with a sentence written in thick crayon red letters at the bottom of his poster. "Sometimes love finds you when you stop looking and just open the door." Later that night, Matt wrote in his notebook again, the one he hadn't touched in weeks. Day 100 with Buddy. "Turns out we weren't rescuing a dog, we were being rescued by fur and friendship, by a woman with pie and a past, by a boy who never stopped. Hoping, turns out, home isn't a place, it's a feeling, and it's right here." He closed the notebook and placed it gently in the drawer. From the hallway came the sound of laughter. Vanessa and Ben arguing over whose turn it was to give Buddy his bedtime treat. The kind of sound that fills a house with light, even on the darkest night. Matt smiled, leaned back in his chair, and let it fill him. It was true. Home wasn't a place. It was people, and they were finally, completely home. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what part of this story touched your heart the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and we truly enjoy reading every single message from this wonderful community. If this story made you smile, stirred your soul, or reminded you of someone you love, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next heartwarming journey. There's so much more to come. Thank you for spending your time with us today. In a world that often moves too fast, choosing to slow down and listen to a story like this is something truly special. We're honored to have shared it with you. Until next time, take care, be kind, and never underestimate the power of a single selfless act.